Hi, I'm Tula Pink. Today we are talking about English paper piecing, the sewing. So this is where the real magic happens. You've done all your prep work, you're ready to go. I'm going to teach you everything I know about sewing by hand for English paper piecing. So when we're getting ready to sew, to actually put needle to fabric, there's a couple of things that are going to make this turn out better. So one of the things I figured out early on was that this whole concept of perfection. So striving for perfection is admirable. Achieving it is super boring and also never gonna happen. So instead of putting all of because this is by hand and not by machine, I know that I'm never gonna truly achieve perfection. So I gave up on that a long time ago. Instead of trying to get the perfect stitch that is completely invisible, which I know will never happen, I instead put all my effort into hiding my mistakes. So one of the ways that I do that is through thread color. So I use, when I travel and I am sewing, because most of my hand sewing is done on the move. If I'm at home, I'm going to sit down in my studio at my sewing machine and sew on the machine. But when I am out of the studio, watching TV at night, on an airplane, I still want something to do. And the best thing that I can think of to do is to sew. It makes me the happiest. So I want something I can take with me. And that is the beauty of English paper piecing, is you can start and stop anywhere. So English paper piecing doesn't require a whole bunch of setup. I can pull out a little bag of pieces to sew on a plane and put it away when we hit turbulence or whatever. So I can start and stop really easily, and that's a big advantage to English paper piecing. One of the ways I'm going to ensure that my thread doesn't show on the front of my quilt is actually to camouflage it rather than count on a perfect stitch. And the way that I do that is by matching my thread to the fabric. So when I travel with many, many thread colors. So I will have every possible thread color I could think of for the pieces that I'm working on. In this case, I'm going to be right now showing you English paper piece sewing on this piece. So what I'm looking at here is a centerpiece that has some gold, greenish gold, some greens, some blues, some teals, some aquas, and then this piece, which has a high contrast polka dot that is a Cape polka dot, and it's got this dark teal but also this light sort of celery green color in it. And I want to find the color of thread that's going to best match the edges of this piece. So what I'm looking for is the color that most consistently occurs around the edge of this piece. So I could go with this aqua color, there's this darker teal color, but I think the color I'm gonna come into contact with the most is this sort of teal background of my stars here. So I'm gonna choose a thread color that most closely matches that color. That way, when my stitch goes too deep because I'm too busy watching a movie on the airplane, or I just have a wonky stitch that shows up on front, you'll never be able to see it because it'll fall into the fabric that I'm sewing. So that is probably the most crucial element of choosing or sewing for English paper piecing. Don't try to be perfect. Put all your effort into hiding your mistakes. That way, when you're not perfect, which is inevitable, it won't matter nearly as much. So what we're looking at here is a whole bunch of different colors and trying to match to color. So often it's not going to be one color that's hitting on all the edges. So I'm trying to, find the most consistent color, but when in doubt, I'm going to go, say I have two pieces that I'm sewing together. So say I'm sewing this piece to this piece. So if I'm sewing these two pieces together, there is not necessarily a balanced color between these two pieces. So when in doubt, I'm always going to choose the color that goes with the lighter fabric. So when in doubt, go light. That's my general rule. It's accurate about 95% of the time. So in an extreme case, say you're sewing a white piece to a black piece, I'm always going to use a white thread and not a black thread. I think that dark thread shows up on light fabric far more than light thread shows up on dark fabric. So when in doubt, go light. In the case of the piece I'm working on today, I have my two pieces really, if you look at the edges of these two pieces, are really quite close. They're both in the blue family, so I know I'm in the sort of teal blue colors. And I'm gonna go with the color that's most consistent, which I believe is this darker color. If I was unsure, I could go with either a lighter aqua or a darker teal, but I really find that across all these pieces is probably my darker color that's gonna match the best. But when in doubt, go light. So the first thing I'm gonna do is thread my needle. Like we talked about earlier in the tools section, I'm going to thread my needle off the spool and I'm not going to cut it first. I'm going to thread my needle and then cut the thread off the spool. And so the first thing I'm going to do, because this is a new piece, a new spool of thread, is I'm going to give myself a little angled cut. And I'm cutting it at a slight angle to give me a little point on the thread itself. Now, the thing I'm not going to do, no matter how badly I want to, is lick the thread. Just don't do it. Because what happens is the moisture when you lick the thread causes the thread to actually expand. And what's going to happen is it may help you thread your needle in the moment. I will not deny that it sometimes does work. But what happens is as it dries, as your lick dries on the thread, that thread is going to expand and become a little palm at the end of your piece of thread, and it's going to knot around the rest of your thread. That's what's going to catch as you're sewing. So I don't really want to lick the thread. Well, I shouldn't lick the thread. I'm dying to lick the thread, but I'm not going to do it. So one of the ways that makes it easier to thread a needle is to bring the needle to the thread rather than the thread to the needle. Now that I've mentioned it, I did it really easily when I wasn't paying attention. And then pull my thread through, pull it off the top of my spool, and cut it. So now I have my thread. One thing that you're gonna notice when I start to sew is that I am never going to tie a knot in this thread loosely. I am going to start with it just like this. I have tried every single knot that I can find a YouTube video for, and I can't do any of them. There's so many knot tricks in the world, and for whatever reason, my brain cannot process any of them. So I never tie a knot in my thread ever. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start by putting my two pieces together. So I'm gonna sew this triangle onto this little pentagon. I'm gonna use my Sew Tight because it's amazing. And so what I'm looking for here is just the little ends on either end of this piece. So I'm just trying to line those up and center it. Put my little magnet on. Now I have my piece. They're being really nicely held together by my Sew Tight here, right? Here, that's where it says Sew Tight. So the first thing I'm gonna do, because I have these little ears here, which are sort of annoying, is I'm gonna pull it out of the way. So I can actually pull it out of the way and put it under my magnet just to keep it out of the way. So see how my magnet's sort of holding that little ear out of the way so it'll not interfere with my sewing. And so now I'm looking at my 2 points, my 2 corner pieces right here where they line up. And I'm gonna take my thread with no knot in it, right? And I'm gonna go through one corner and the other corner and pull it through so that there's just this little tail. It's about, I would say maybe like a little half inch tail. And there's no knot in my thread. And I'm gonna bring my needle through that little corner again until I have a loop. So now I have this little loop sticking up. I'm gonna bring my needle up through it once, bring it up through it twice, and that's gonna double knot the first stitch of my piece. And now that piece isn't going anywhere. So they're totally tied together, nice and tight. And I didn't ever have to do some sort of origami with my fingers to tie some kind of weird knot. So now I'm gonna go through. So one of the things you may notice if you're watching this is most people are taught to sew towards themselves. So most people are taught to sew with their needle out here and come through this way and pull it out this way. I actually naturally sew the opposite direction. And after being made painfully aware by most of my sewing teachers that I sewed backwards, I started investigating why I did that and trying to figure out if it was just something I was doing naturally or if there was actually some advantage to it. And I've determined that there actually is an advantage to sewing away from myself rather than towards myself. And the advantage is this: I never ever suffer. I hand sew maybe sometimes 2 to 4 hours an evening. I really like it. And I never suffer any kind of pain in my thumb, in my wrist, my elbow, or my shoulder. I never have any kind of complication or physical trauma from sewing that long every night. And I think there's a couple reasons for that. So when you just drop your hands drop on a table sort of like this, right? When I hold my needle and thread, I'm actually holding them in much the resting position that they would naturally fall into when I'm sewing. When I do this, look what I'm doing to my wrist. I don't know if you can see sort of what I'm doing to my wrist, but I'm turning it away from myself and actually torquing my wrist. I can already feel something in my wrist. It doesn't hurt or anything, but I can feel a pulling in my wrist that over a long period of time and many, many stitches is going to add up to some kind of wrist trauma. So by sitting this way, I'm actually sitting the way my hands naturally rest, which is putting zero trauma on my wrist, elbow, shoulder, or thumb pad. The other thing that I have found that maybe is an advantage to sewing what we'll call backwards is if I'm pulling the needle thread through this way into my fabric that's held in this hand, I'm actually trying to move two independent objects towards each other in a very precise way. I'm trying to catch just the top two threads of each piece of fabric as I stitch, and if these are two independent things, I have to guide two things towards themselves. When I sew this way, it's actually a more relaxed position, and I'm taking my knuckles and resting them on the hand that's holding my pieces. So now I'm guiding one object towards another object, but in one motion, so it's all one piece. So if this hand moves, they move together. And so it's a lot easier to get a precise needle through the fabric when I'm working with one object rather than two separate entities. The third reason is, and this I think should be the most obvious, is if I'm coming through this way, I can't see the back of my piece. So I'm coming through this way and having to turn it towards myself, I'm now torquing this wrist in order to see it. But by going through this way, I can see both pieces at the same time. So when I say I sew backwards, I now have reasons why. Because I really thought about it and really tried to do it this way to see if there was any, and what I suffered from was a lot more trauma to my wrist and elbow by going this way. So I go this way, my hands are rested on top of each other, and a couple of things that make a good stitch are how many stitches you stitch per inch. So I would say I stitch too many stitches per inch. So if I was a student in my own class, I would tell myself to relax. But I'm like 15 years deep on this now, and some habits can't be undone. So if you're new to this, what you want to aim for is about 16 to 18 stitches per inch is really solid. You can go up to 20, but any more than that, and you're actually creating more damage along the edge of this fabric, that's essentially going to do more harm than good, because the more holes you put through the end of this fabric, the more you're damaging the end of the fabric, this little, which is essentially your seam, not essentially, it is your seam. And the more damage you do to that seam, the weaker your actual stitch is going to be. So we want a good amount of stitches, but not so many. So don't kill yourself trying to do the smallest stitch in the world. It's actually counterproductive. So I'm gonna move over. So I made one stitch, and see this little tail that's sticking up right here? That is from our first stitch when we did that knot. I'm actually, the thread's coming back out here, and I'm actually pulling it around the little thread, the little tail that's sticking up, and I'm going to sew that tail into my stitch. And so you can see with every stitch, it's laying down more and more, and it's just gonna rest inside my stitch. So I'm coming up over the little tail and back with the needle underneath it until it makes almost like a little tunnel around it. Nope, got caught. And I'm gonna start sewing that into my seam. So I'm just trying to grab just the smallest, like 2 little threads, just a couple threads from each piece. So there are 2 reasons that your thread will show up on the front of your quilt. 1, you're going too deep. So there's a natural inclination to want to go deeper on your stitch because you think it's going to hold better, but all it's really doing is putting more thread on the front of your fabric than on the back. So this is a really, really shallow stitch. It's so shallow and so gentle. The other reason your thread is going to show up on the front of your quilt is if you go in at an angle. So if you look at the needle, going in at an angle is going to put more fabric on the front of your quilt than on the back of it. So it's really tempting to put your needle in at an angle like this because you think, oh, I'm moving so fast. I'm making so much progress. I'm getting across this piece so quickly because you're going in diagonally and covering more distance. The problem is that when you do that and go in at an angle, that's putting the longest part of your stitch on the front and the shortest part of your stitch on the back. So you want your needle to go in perpendicular to your piece. So see how it's totally straight in? Because that's putting the straight part of my stitch on the front, and then I'm moving over to make the next stitch, and that's leaving the diagonal part of the stitch, which is the longest part of the stitch, on the back of my quilt. Okay, so now I'm at the end of this piece. So I'm going to keep going to the next piece, but I want to secure this piece in place before I do that. So I made my last stitch all the way up at this corner. I'm going to come just like the way we started. Every time I come to 2 new points, no matter where I'm at, oh, and then I pulled the stitch. Every time I come to 2 new points, right? So these are 2 points I haven't been at before. I'm going to go through, make my loop, right? Just like when I started, I'm going to pull my thread through once, pull it through twice, and now I've got a knot on that piece, and I can take this off and open it, and I have a beautifully little stitch piece, if I do say so myself. So now I need to go to the next piece. So when I go to the next piece, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull the little ear out of the way. And these are now 2 new points that I haven't touched yet. So I will tie the same knot just like I did before, go through each corner, pull the loop. Every time I come to a corner, I'm going to do this little double knot trick. And the reason for that is because if something happens in the middle, say my thread breaks, I pull too hard, whatever happens, I know that I'm secure all the way to this point. I know that I don't need to worry about my thread all the way to the beginning. So every time I come to a point, I'm going to tie a knot. So what's going to happen is, essentially, wherever your points come together in your piece is the weakest part of your quilt. This is stronger than this because it's 2 pieces that want to pull away from each other. So by tying a knot here and a knot here, and then if I add a piece in here, I'll tie another knot from here to here and another knot from here to here when I come to it. And now I have a circle of knots. So there'll be 1, 2, 3, 4 knots all around this point. I have now turned the weakest part of my quilt into the strongest part of my quilt because of all those little circle of knots I have holding all those points together. Because this is all pressed these are all basted away from each other. It's essentially the same as having an open seamed quilt. So if you're doing a machine quilt and all the seams are pressed open, you know that that's weaker than if you press them to one side, but it lays flatter, so there's an advantage. So the same rules apply here. It's almost like an open seam quilt. So whenever I come to 2 new pieces, I want to really ensure that those pieces are locked in place tight. Say that I'm done with this piece now. I've just finished sewing this and I'm all done with it. I've sewn my knot and it's all finished. And I need to either change my thread color because I'm starting a new piece, or I'm just out of thread. Now please, public service announcement. We are not in a thread drought. So please don't sew until you only have this little, like an inch or 2 of thread left. If at any point you're trying to bend your needle back as far as you can to see if you can get it through your fabric one more time, do not make yourself suffer that way. It's not worth it. Just start a new thread. I have been using this package of thread for every single English paper piece quilt that I've made in the last 10 years, and I've only replaced 4 spools. We are not going to run out of thread, I promise. So please start a new piece. That's my public service announcement. So back to our finishing. So say we've finished this, we're just going to pretend, right? That I finished this piece, and now for whatever reason I want to start a new thread. I've tied my little knot so it's nice and secure right here, and I'm just going to take my needle, run it a little ways under my fabric, whatever seam is closest to it, and I'm going to take my little curved snips and I'm going to cut it right at the fabric. So if you look at a piece like this that's currently in progress that I've been working on, there's no thread tails anywhere on the back of this. Nothing that's going to pop through to the front or get caught up or tied around something else. They're all buried in the seams. And that's a super important part of your sewing because it will get caught up in things later. So you want to bury your thread as you go. So one of the things that is mildly controversial in the English paper piecing world, yes, there is an English paper piecing world, is when to pull your pieces. Pulling your pieces should happen as you go, in my opinion. If you can see on this piece that I'm working on here, how only the pieces that haven't been sewn to something else still have paper. All of this is paper free right here. Every time I sew a piece in on all of its sides, I pop the paper out. Because if this was all full of paper, when I'm trying to sew a piece onto the edge, I have all this paper to contend with and it gets big and it gets unruly. Because I've pulled the paper out of the center, if I want to sew something to this edge, I can just wad it up because it's all sewn together and there's nothing stiff in it. So I want to pull paper. You can see where I've left paper. So this side is unsewn, the paper's still in. This side is unsewn, this side is unsewn. So only the pieces that haven't been sewn in all the way around still have paper in them. And a lot of people ask who are either new to glue basting or new to English paper piecing in general is, how do you pull out the papers? And it's really easy when you're working with glue. You just lift up one side, any side, stick your finger under it and pull it out. It's really that simple. Some people like to punch a little hole in the middle of their piece so that they can get a little finger lift on it. Again, that's time I don't want to take, but it does work. And these papers can be reused up to 3 or 4 times. So anytime you buy one of the English paper piecing kits that I've designed, you'll have enough papers to do the whole quilt and only use them once. But if you think you might want to make this quilt again or a portion of this quilt or rework something, you can save all of these pieces and reuse them up to 3 or 4 times. So they really do hold up pretty well. So that is basically all there is that you need to know about English paper piecing. It's a really simple process that just takes time. But if you want to make a masterpiece, this is my favorite way to do it. Thank you so much for watching my tutorials on English paper piecing here at fatquartershop.com. I am super, super excited to be able to share this with you. It's my favorite way to piece, and I have more videos coming up, so don't forget to check those out.